All right, Dan, we have Game 5 of the World Series right here on 104.5, The Team tonight. And one of the voices you're going to hear tonight, he's showing up a little bit of a day early for us. You hear him on Sunday Night Baseball. You hear him on Baseball Tonight. You hear him on the Baseball Tonight podcast. You see him on ESPN. You'll hear him tonight on the World Series. And you hear him each and every week here on The Drive. And that is our friend Buster Olney. Buster, how are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. Just starting to think about preparing for, what happens if the series ends today, what happens if it ends on Friday, what happens if it ends on Saturday, and still trying to process why the Arizona Diamondbacks are throwing any pitch in the strike zone to Corey Seager.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I want to get to that. Your podcast that just came out, you spent a little time with, one of my favorite characters of the game, the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred. And I have not always been very kind to Mr. Manfred and all the things that he has done. I love the pitch clock. So I do think the game is going in the right direction as far as that's concerned. But you had you caught up with him on a number of subjects. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I did it in the radio booth with Boog Shambi, who is doing play-by-play in the World Series. The two of us sort of double-teaming Rob. And it was interesting because I saw him as being more relaxed than ever in having discussions about possible change. And maybe it's because the advent of the pitch clock has been really successful. The idea of World Series games under 3 hours, which, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that would have seemed inconceivable. And now we're seeing that. I think, maybe he's feeling good about the success they have there because he very much entertained the questions we had about, change with the electronic strike zone, which I think is looming for 2025 would be my guess. I think they're going to go to a challenge system, and Rob talked about how they, have more and more comfort with the technology that they have. This is something he brought up earlier in the World Series, the effort that baseball will make moving forward to reestablish the preeminence of the starting pitchers, because I think they recognize that this parade of relievers we're seeing, and the Diamondbacks, tried to win Game 4 with it yesterday. It was a total disaster. I have found it as a fan who grew up, getting excited about pitching matchups.
Yeah.
Pedro Martinez versus Roger Clemens, et cetera, unwatchable.
Yeah.
And it's clear going forward they're going to make efforts to curb the number of relievers the teams use. For example, maybe tie the starting pitcher to the designated hitter. If you pull the starting pitcher, that means you lose the designated hitter, giving you incentive if you're a manager to do that. He talked about expansion. I think that conversation is going to start next month, I believe. And privately, I think it's already started. We talked on the, I've talked about it with you guys before. Nashville, that's a family farm back in Vermont. They're going to get one team. I think the other team is going to be more mountain time, West Coast time. Salt Lake City maybe being the team that lands the other one. And we talked about the playoff format, which fans of the Braves, the Dodgers have complained about during the course of this winter or this postseason because those teams got knocked out early. And it was a very well-rounded conversation. As I say, it was on ESPN Radio, but the whole interview that we did can be found on the podcast. I thought it was fascinating. As I say, I found him to be more open than I ever have, more relaxed in the conversation. So it was kind of fun.
Those are the pressing issues.
Yeah,
those are the issues that the fan base would want to hear, which is great that you guys got answers on all of those. And it leads to a question before we move on to the X's and O's of the World Series of where you think the game now sits as we're nearing the end of the 2023 season, because as you mentioned, the pitch clock has been a welcome addition, but does it appear as though the game is healthy and continuing to move in a healthier direction?
I think there are some signs of that. The fact that the attendance was up, by 9-10%, I think they're going to be in a better position with some of their local broadcasts. But I mean, the television ratings are the television ratings.
Yeah.
You know, they're going down on a national level, and it's viewed, I know within the communications industry, the media industry, is more of a regionalized sport. I think the way that you transcend that, and we've seen this in the NBA, we've seen it with the NFL, is you have to highlight stars.
Yes.
And you have to get people excited about stars, which is part of the reason why I think they want to, you know, get the starting pitchers back to being the Hulk Hogans and the Andres the Giant of the sport.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that'll start to reverse that. I'd also say, look, it was so predictable once you had the Rangers and the Diamondbacks in the World Series this year that the TV ratings for Fox were going to be down.
Yep.
If you had the Yankees and the Dodgers, it would be different.
Absolutely.
You know, people during the regular season will complain about the Sunday night broadcast and say, well, why don't you guys show Tampa Bay more? Why don't you show Arizona more? Because you know why? People don't watch.
Right.
They don't watch as much, and that's just it's a simple fact.
Yeah.
And you know, now on the other hand, if you know you had you know a broader range of stars within the sport, maybe that would bring more eyeballs to the game. So I do think the next year, my guess is the ratings are going to be up, and that this is kind of an outlier situation because you do have, you know, low seeds like the Rangers and you know, the Rangers and Diamondbacks, and this World Series would be like if, you know, Princeton played George Mason in the championship game in the NCAA versus Kentucky and Duke, and that's just the way it goes. And I'm not criticizing it. I actually think it's fun and fascinating, but I understand why casual fans would not be as drawn to it.
No, I get it as well. We're hanging out with our guy, Buster Olney of ESPN. He covers Major League Baseball. You see him on Baseball Tonight. You hear him on tonight's World Series broadcast. Also, download the Baseball Tonight podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and he joins us each and every week here on The Drive. Buster, on Monday, Aaron Judge received the Roberto Clemente Award, which is probably one of the most prestigious awards that any player in Major League Baseball can receive, and well-deserved. Afterwards, he told Dave Lennon of Newsday, he said, you know what, I've had regular conversations with Hal Steinbrenner. I made a Freudian slip there, but with Hal Steinbrenner about the changes that are coming. And he said right after the World Series, you'll get to see some more visible changes. He mentioned strategy. He mentioned coaches. He mentioned a lot of things that if I'm Brian Cashman, I'm like, what do you mean the owner's talking to one of our players about all these things?
Well, and you got my first feel of that in spring training. I remember being in a group of reporters talking with Hal, and Hal talked about, and I think it was about the question of whether or not Anthony Volpe was ready to be the shortstop. And Aaron Judge weighed in and, you know, told him privately, I think he's got a lot of confidence. He's someone who can, you know, even though he's a young player, can handle the moment. And Hal volunteered that to us. And that clearly was something that stuck with him, that resonated with him. And there's something that I find really, you know, great about that. Now, God forbid that, you know, you have your star player be political, you know, and be destructive and complain around the edges on this. I don't think Aaron Judge is like that. I don't think Garrett Cole's like that. Some of the people that Hal listens to. And I think it's good, you know, going forward, because if you get into a dynamic where, you know, the owner is in a castle and doesn't talk to the players and stuff goes wrong, then the players will complain about it. Well, you know what? In this case, you got a situation where the owner is listening to the players about, hey, what do you guys think about the balance of analytics? And I think that there does need to be a balance, because this information, a lot of it is really important, is really good, and it's how a lot of teams win. But I also think it's good if you know, if the owner hears the players.
All right, and so I want to take this one step further, because you mentioned the NBA before and about players being big, prominent parts, and the NBA does a great job in promoting their stars. Well, one thing that happens in the NBA a lot is the players have an awful lot of influence of who is on the team and who's not. That's sort of new to baseball, and I see this dynamic, and I wonder if it's a dynamic where actually Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole may say, hey, you know what, we're really really antiquated in comparison to other organizations from what we hear from the players, and that it actually might have some fallout on Brian Cashman and the front office of the New York Yankees.
I don't think that Hal, and this is specific to Hal, this is not every owner, but just my sense of Hal is that Hal has his own view of Brian, and if a player, came and said something negative to him, I don't think he would necessarily take that to heart. I don't think that's, that's the sort of leader that he would be. I think he would value from Garrett, from Judge, like if Judge said to him, hey, you know what we really need? More left-handed hitting.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on with the left-handed hitting? We can use more of that. That might be more inclined, Hal might be more inclined at that point if Brian Cashman brought to him, hey, we have a deal on the table for Juan Soto.
Right.
Or this is what it takes to get Cody Bellinger, that Hal might be more inclined to say, yeah, let's go do it. Because I just had Aaron Judge telling me, he doesn't have as much, they don't have as much protection in the lineup, and we need more balance. That's how I think that the influence would play, as opposed to, George, his dad, loved to play the triangle game.
Oh, yeah.
It
was great.
He loved to use the information from a coach, from a minor league instructor, from a player, hell, from a cab driver, to go to Joe Torre or somebody else and say, yeah, I hear you don't do this, or I hear you don't do that. George loved it. My sense of Hal, he doesn't operate that way.
I want that.
Yeah,
I want that back.
Of course. We're in the media. Of course we want that.
That's right. He would even go to George Costanza for that information, Buster. You know that.
Absolutely.
He'd go to literally anywhere. Yeah.
It's funny guys say that. Coincidentally, this morning when I was doing some radio, we're staying in the same hotel where the Texas Rangers and some Major League Baseball officials are. I'm sitting down in the lobby, and I'm trying to collect information about, Bruce Bochy, working on a piece on him, the manager of the Rangers, and who comes walking into the lobby but Joe Torre.
Oh, no.
And we had a brief conversation about Joe, and so it's funny as we sit here. That triangulation used to make that life hell for people who worked within the Yankees organization, because you just didn't know where George was getting his information from.
Oh,
right.
I need that.
Yeah. Well, while we talk about front offices, last week we had an in-depth talk about Craig Breslow being hired in Boston, and we've been following that, and it was very entertaining to be on the phone with you when Chaim Bloom was fired a little while ago. But my follow-up that I didn't get a chance to ask you last week was, do you expect any other moves in Boston in terms of supplemental help for Craig Breslow, who will be doing this for the first time, leading the baseball ops department? Could you see any veterans being brought in to kind of aid him as he learns his way through this?
And I haven't dug into that question. In covering the World Series, I haven't had time specifically to go that layer.
Sure.
I will tell you that the perception is that they do have a lot of people there who have been working for the organization, who are good at what they do, who are incredibly underutilized by Chaim.
Oh.
Whether or not that's true, I can't speak to it first person, but that was absolutely the perception. Now, number one, right off the bat, when you get a former player who comes in and Craig Breslow's the perception of him is that his expertise is in pitching, as you know, Craig isn't necessarily going to have training on rules and waiver regulations and when you have to turn in rosters, that sort of thing. Brian Cashman, I had a recent conversation with him when he was talking about how important that person is. Gene Afterman is the assistant general manager for the Yankees. That's what she does. She's a lawyer. She's trained in rules and very specific information about how transactions must be done.
Right.
And my instinct is Craig Breslow might need someone like that to help guide him through, as well as keeping in communication with other teams.
All right, Buster, before we let you go, I'm going to go to my New York Mets. My prediction is by Monday, Craig Counsell will be introduced as the New York Mets manager. Am I way off base?
I think that decision is entirely in the hands of one person, and I don't necessarily think it's Craig Counsell. I think it's Mark Atanasio, the owner of the Brewers.
Wow.
I think he's going to have a price at some point, a price point for Counsell. If he wants to retain him, this is what you're going to pay. We talked in the past about, and this is all based on talking with people who know counsel, that, as we talked about in the past, he wants to push the ceiling for what managers make. He's in a position to do that, to make huge dollars. I would expect that the Mets are going to make them the biggest offer, but he's a Wisconsin guy.
Yes.
He grew up there.
Yeah.
That's his hometown team. And I think this could be a case, kind of like when CC Sabathia was a free agent. His choice was he could either stay in his home state of California, and the best offer he had there was the Angels at $100 million, or he could take the Yankees' money at $161 million. That's the parallel decision I think the council's going to have to make. Does he take the money, the most money on the table, or does he stay at home? I think if there's a huge gap, that's when the Mets have a chance.
Dan and I also talked about this yesterday, and we said that the attraction of being that guy, being the guy who could win a championship, win a World Series that nobody has done in New York with the Mets since 1986. I think that, that competitive edge could be another thing on top of Uncle Steve's billions of dollars.
I don't agree with you
on
that. I think that Craig knows he's going to get to manage. I think he loves managing. I think he manages what's in front of him. And I don't think he's necessary. Because let's face it, if he wanted to go to New York, he'd probably already have his uniform. He'd already have been introduced.
Yeah.
Because that opportunity is there, and he's the first choice. But I do think that, I think the Sabathia comparison is an apt one because of as with CeCe's first choice was not necessarily to play with the Yankees,
right? And
then when the agent presented the numbers, he was like, "Well, okay, I'll go there."
Exactly.
And then he grew to love it, and it was great, and he rose to the moment. And I think counsel could absolutely do that in New York. But as we sit here today, the draw I think is managing A. And B, then we'll see where the numbers are with the salary offers.
He's absolutely the best. He is Buster Olney. He covers Major League Baseball for ESPN. You'll hear him tonight here on 104.5 The Team with Game 5 of the World Series. Download the Baseball Tonight podcast. See him on Baseball Tonight and each and every week here on The Drive. Buster, thank you so much. Safe travels to you. If it ends tonight, well, then you get a little bit of a long weekend. And if not, enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay, guys. Thanks. I appreciate it.